This is the Practically Culture Spoilercast, a podcast devoted to diving deeper on the TV and movies, maybe sometimes the video games that you and we are into. I'm your host, Logan Bowe, podcasting from Lehigh, and I'm joined by the one, the only Bobcast on the Bay Area. How are you, Bob?
Hey there, doing great. How's it going with you?
You know me, just hanging out.
Nice.
This week, we spoil Succession, and we'll also talk about what we're consuming and even make a top 5 or so list by the end. If you like what you hear, look for us in an unusual podcast app and at practicallyculture.com. Also on YouTube, we recommend you check it all out if you're into the show. We're spoiling TV, movies, probably sometimes video games. It's the Practically Culture Spoilercast. Let's rock. Oh, man, it is good to be back, Bob. And before we get into the spoiling, as always, let's chat about what we're watching or playing. And I'll even go first. So I've been casting a wide net over here, trying to see what hooks me for me to dive deeper into. It's probably sort of a mixed metaphor, but oh well. I've been trying to catch up on Better Call Saul, which I just have to say really is pretty good. I'm not sure we'll get to the point of spoiling the current season by the time it's relevant, but it really is good. One Day at a Time, which is like this multicam sitcom on Netflix. Been getting some amount of buzz. I decided to watch a couple episodes. I don't know. I think I'll probably cut bait on that. Casual, I started up again. It seems, casually. I think the show is sort of losing its juice for me, but I'll probably end up finishing it. But still, the radar is looking for something to ping me for what I want to spoil next.
Yeah, makes sense.
What do you got cooking? TV, video games, movies?
Well, like I said on the last show, I'm sort of waiting on the video game front. I'm playing some Far Cry still, but I'm waiting for the heavy hitters that come out in the fall. In terms of TV and movies, there's that new Jack Ryan series on Amazon that's dropping on Friday, and I think I'm going to check that out. I think I want to see where that goes as a series versus how it's been done as a TV show or as a movie, a series of movies, I should say. Let me get my words right. And, John Krasinski in the lead. So I'm excited about that to a certain degree. Also, I was thinking, Crazy Rich Asians has created this desire in me to go back and watch Fresh Off the Boat, which I think you recommended to me originally. And then I was like, I don't know if that's a show I care about. And now I'm like, that actually, Constance Wu is doing this thing for me. I want to see where this all came from and understand how that show came to be, and see. I heard it's pretty good. Did you end up seeing it, by the way?
Seeing
the whole season of Fresh Off the Boat?
Yeah, I think we're in the third. Is it?
Oh,
I think the fourth season might be starting to come up. I can't remember. I sort of drifted away from it a little bit, but it's always been fine. It's just, a 20-plus episode sitcom. It's hard to keep up the momentum. Well, I mean, it's fine. It's just hard for me to go back to it every time. But it's fine. Constance Wu is good in it, and I haven't seen Crazy Rich Asians, which is a good idea. I'll think about it, and maybe we'll decide to spoil it for next week or something like that. But I do know her pretty well from Fresh Off the Boat. It's interesting, though, because in Crazy Rich Asians, she's like the romantic lead, right? Unmarried, young, attractive woman. And she's but she's just like, she's the mom of teenagers, or of at least one teenager in Fresh Off the Boat. So it's like a different role.
Whoa, way different. That's fascinating. Yeah, because she's playing someone like late 20s, early 30s in Crazy Rich Asians, and somebody who's successful but still pretty young, and it's really like a focus is that she's young and successful. Anyway, very different roles. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, she's probably in her early 30s, maybe 35 by the time Fresh Off the Boat starts. So it isn't necessarily that different age-wise, but a different role, definitely.
Right.
Anyway.
So I guess a lot of Asian movies and TV that could be on our radar.
But Fresh Off the Boat is pretty good.
Cool.
Anyway, ready to get to this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Succession. The Roy family, Logan Roy and his 4 children, control one of the biggest media and entertainment conglomerates in the world and are forced to contemplate what the future will hold for them once their aging father begins to step back from the company. Starring Brian Cox, Jeremy Strong, Sarah Snook, Kieran Culkin, Matthew McFadden, plenty more people. Created by Jesse Armstrong, who has done English TV like Peep Show and The Thick of It, but not a whole lot on American TV that I could tell yet. Anyway, Bob, what did you think?
Yeah, so I really liked this show. I would say even loved could be a word I'd use. So this was really smart, witty, fully developed. I love the ensemble cast. There's so many characters that all get a lot of screen time, even with a limited amount of screen time in general. We were just talking about Fresh Off the Boat and how it's like 20 plus episodes every season. This is a very concentrated 10 1 hour plus. Some of them are slightly longer than an hour, but it's 10 hours of TV. But all those cast members you mentioned are really important. I couldn't see the show existing without all of them being, instrumental parts of the storytelling. And I think that's a testament to how well the writing was done. So this is an easy one to recommend. I'm praising it a lot, but I think it's well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that wants to pop out of my mouth is that I think I mentioned on our main show that I don't have a lot of TV shows that I love right now. There's some that I watch and that impress me, and some that I like and I think are really good. But in terms of shows that I love and feel really drawn to on an almost emotional level, this one might be jumping to the top of that list for me, even though I find it
Nice.
maybe sort of arid right now. But it is about the super rich, and it feels like a trendy thing to say that we have so many shows about the super rich. I don't know if we have tons about people this rich, but we certainly do have some.
Yeah.
But in any case, it definitely avoids being a cliche. It really is impactful, delightful, shows the cutthroat nature of it in ways that I think other super rich shows might not, and really a lot of humanity, just like the I don't know, the daddy issues, the I don't know, chimps in a hierarchy aspect of being alive. And it just, I don't know, it makes them appeal to me on a human level more than a lot of shows do, and I would totally recommend it. I think it's one of the best shows on TV, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. These aren't just caricatures. These are real people that you can relate to. At first, you think they're all assholes. By the end of the first episode, especially some of them, you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do with this.
Well, they are all assholes.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying that's not their that's not their only characteristic, even though it's definitely part of the mix. It's just not the full story.
Yeah.
So don't, yeah, both don't watch this assuming that they're not going to be assholes by the end, because they're still assholes through the whole thing, but also people can be assholes and likable in other things too. And that's
I
what the show
mean,
teaches us.
I'm an asshole, and maybe, well, I like to think there are other aspects of me too. So
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, it's a lot to get our arms around in terms of a spoiler cast. So we're gonna dive in, sort of vaguely go with some of the major plot points, but any thread that you feel like pulling and unraveling a particular sweater, let's just go with it, Bob. Whatever
Okay.
reminds you of, oh yeah, this I want to talk about. We're just gonna go with it. We don't have to worry about the structure for structure's sake. We'll just dive in and see how it goes, huh?
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, so um, I mean, the main thing that sets all this in motion is Logan Roy. It's also, we don't get a whole lot of shows with my name as the main guy, but this one
Yeah.
has one. He is. I love how I've read about it. People say he's not necessarily Rupert Murdoch, but he's not Rupert Murdoch either.
Sounds
So
about right. Yeah.
so, so he's the head of this huge media company. It does seem pretty conservative. And then he has been planning to anoint his son, Kendall, to take over the company. But then he changes his mind seemingly abruptly. And then to make things even more complicated, he has like this brain hemorrhage right after he does it. So it's just throwing everything into disarray, and everyone's mad about it at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and then there are all these other siblings, kids of his that are not in the running necessarily, but they're impacted by Kendall taking over. And since Kendall's only half taking over because the paperwork of undoing the takeover wasn't finished before the brain hemorrhage, like there's a bit of a clusterfuck going on here, and the kids are not all on the same page as to how to deal with it.
Yeah, and that's one of the first clues of what kind of show this is going to be, because I feel like maybe in my family,
Uh-oh.
well, no, I'm just saying that if this were to happen, we probably just like, okay, the momentum's to have Kendall take the lead, and so everyone just sort of let that happen, even though there's some vagueness about whether Dad wanted that to happen. But in this one, it's like, oh no. If we know anything, it's Dad didn't want you, Kendall, to be in charge here, and so they're all going to fight him for it, or at least try to cut him down. They don't necessarily want to take over everything by themselves, but they're just not going to make it easy for Ken. And yeah, let's show how cutthroat this is from the beginning.
Yeah, and it's this interesting distinction because you can interpret it either way, because it could be that he doesn't want Kendall to take over because he's not ready to give up, and it has nothing to do necessarily with Kendall's lack of experience or being the fit for the job, but it was unclear as to the intention. And so it could just be that Logan Roy, even though he was getting older, he's in his early 80s, just wanted to hang on and had his own power hungry aspirations that he didn't want to let go of. So before he has his episode with the medical situation, you're kind of left, and you hear a little. They give a little bit of the backstory of Roman, having had gone through. He had gone through therapy and had a drug addiction problem, and he's clean now and all this stuff. And that's a little bit of a cloud over him that people tend to, and we'll come back to that, they tend to give him a hard time for in terms of his character, his what's the right word, his character or his fit for the role or his responsibility.
Wait, was it Roman who went to rehab, or was it Ken?
Oh, excuse me, Ken. I'm confusing
okay.
people. Roman probably participated in all the same shit, but there's no idea, there's no indication that he had to go through therapy. This is all about Ken. This is about the golden boy Ken, who's supposed to take over. Apologies for saying Roman earlier, but essentially it's unclear if he's not going to take over because he's not ready, or just because Logan isn't ready to let go. And everybody in the family thinks of it one of those two ways for the most part. And that's the distinction.
Yeah, I do find it pretty interesting. I think that if there is like an A story, I mean, there are a lot of different interweaving stories, very ensemble casting, all that sort of stuff. But if there is an A story, I feel like it's Logan and Ken, their story, their power struggle, their dad struggle.
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe, well, there's so many great characters. I sort of want to like highlight a few of them and just sort of take their story as it goes, and maybe we'll get a complete picture here. But Ken's and Logan's is the first one.
Yeah.
And so from the very beginning, Logan really seems to dress down Ken and make him prove that he's tough enough, and Ken doesn't always act like he's tough enough. In the beginning, he says stuff like, do you want to hit me, or something like that, and Kendall just sort of it doesn't really do much. And I guess Logan takes that as confirmation that he doesn't want Ken to be the main guy. In fact, isn't it like one of the very first scenes where Ken is trying to push through this deal, and he's trying to make it happen, even though it's not really going to happen, and it looks like he's sort of not having the killer instinct, and then people are like, we should get your dad involved in this, and he's like, whoa, you want to call your dad?
Yeah.
At the same time, you sort of feel like he's in over his head.
Yeah, I think the distinction I want to make, which, by the way, you can interpret this a million different ways. By the end of the show, I didn't think it was clear that Logan had a better grasp of the modern business landscape than Ken did. I think, and this is Bob's hot take, I guess.
You don't think getting to local TV is the wave of the future, Bob?
Right. I think Logan at the micro level is way better than Ken. He can really break people and negotiate and get what he wants once it's decided what it is that he wants and what the deal is about. But in terms of choosing the right deal and steering the ship and knowing where this company needs to go in the future, I'm actually team Ken, and I think he had some good ideas, and he actually could do well by his father, or he could impress his father with his business acumen. But his father is so fixated on like the microcosm of each of the little things that he's zoomed in on rather than the bigger picture. I think his father's all about, whose balls can I break this day, this week, and how can I exert power and show that I'm still a dominating force? And Ken is like, how am I going to make this thing avoid the iceberg? Because it's an old conglomerate of old school media companies, and I want to turn the ship, which is really hard. And you got to think strategically and long term, and not just go for those like alpha male micro wins that Logan Roy, as an older man, still is really into. And I think that's what's making the dilemma that much more making it delicious is that there isn't a clear winner in terms of approach. It's just depending on the circumstances, which way is better. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I think you're right. I think that we have a lot of emphasis in the TV show just about how Logan can just defeat other people through his force of will or his killer instinct, his just I don't know, his competitive nature. And Ken, well, he can do it with his dad, though we do see some other moments where he does uh, he does sort of have a little of that killer instinct, like with the startup that ends up dissing him, and then he's like, "Well, I'm going to crush them." That doesn't make him a good person, but it does show that
Right.
he does have a little bit of ruthlessness to them.
Well, and it also shows that he wants to have the ruthlessness. He wants this from his father. He wants to show his father and show to himself that he can do those things that his father is way better at than he is. So there is that interplay as well. I don't feel like Logan has the inverse. As the patriarch of the family, he could give a fuck about whether or not he runs the company in an effective way before he dies, because he's just in it for the power trip. Whereas Ken is the one who's really struggling because he's got to square the circle and balance out both sides of the equation. He both wants to be like, see, Dad, I can bust balls too, but he also wants to be like, whoa, but I don't want to run this company in the ground. I've got to live for another 30 years after this or whatever. So that makes it interesting.
That is right, and I think you're right. I think the show takes the position that Ken has better ideas for the company than Logan. So I agree you're there, and that I'm glad it does give him that, because it focuses so much on the primal aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, just to sort of tie that up, so in the finale, I guess Ken really is going to try to outdo his dad by having a hostile takeover that he orchestrates to be CEO, and he may actually one up him on the alpha chimping. But then his I don't know, it feels very, very Shakespearean that his own weaknesses of wanting to do drugs leads him to a very Chappaquiddick-like moment where he's driving and goes in the river and he ends up killing a person. Even if the circumstances are sort of manslaughtery and not murdery, I don't know. Maybe he could get off. Who even knows? But certainly does not look good for someone like him. And then Logan manages to use that against him and crush him down and win at the end.
Yeah, and I feel like there's actually two finales, because I think it's in episode 6 when he tries to orchestrate the hostile takeover with a board vote, or it's called a vote of no confidence, and that was such a gut wrenching episode. The first time I actually watched it twice. And the way that he gets stuck in traffic, and there's just all these other variables going on with, and different members of the board to get a majority vote have to vote with him, and it's not what you think of who votes in what way. And actually Roman, his weaselly little brother, ends up siding with his dad, and I thought that this was going to be like a much bigger rift between them. I mean, it is for a few episodes, but they end up still talking to each other and making up for it. But
go ahead. I was just going to say, that was one of my favorite scenes of the whole show. I mean, the power dynamics are definitely one of the things that's most interesting to me. Like, whatever context you're in, whoever you might be in, like the sub hierarchy where you're on top and you get to act like a dick to other people, or other people might shift in the middle. So, because Ken is actually being pretty good, he went all the way out to Long Island to secure the final clinching vote, but then traffic made it so he couldn't get there, and because he wasn't in the actual room for the vote, Logan could stand up and dump his chest and intimidate people, especially Roman, I guess, as you called him, his Weasley little brother, to voting for him. And Ken, he's doing pretty well at standing his ground, and I just love like the panting as he's trying to make his way there. You can tell he's just so hyped up, so much energy, and he's really trying to go for it. But he doesn't. You're right. That was in episode 6 or something like that, and he ends up getting fired. And then finale, he's trying to come at the king again, but his own weaknesses get in the way that time.
Right. And in those last few episodes, we've got a lot of like family therapy, and we learn more about how they're going to try to reconstruct their broken relationships because this was a massive betrayal from father to son, and then the siblings are all split in different ways, and then Roman feels bad, but only sort of, in terms of what he did, because he's kind of,
He really wants his dad's approval at the end of the day.
he really does, and he wants that more than anything else. And but he also wants you to know that he doesn't want that. Like,
That's how you know he wants it, because he's trying to convince himself by how much he says it all the time.
right. And we're still just on the like main story, but then there's like so many side stories. We've got this Tom character.
Tom is maybe my favorite, maybe my MVP if we were to choose an MVP of the season.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Tell me more.
So Tom, for one, he's like the biggest example of being like timid and under control and polite when he's with the Roys. But then if he's in another context, especially with Greg, he really tries to bring the hammer down. Like one of my favorite quotes was when Greg, who's like the nephew who just sort of, he's actually surprisingly adept at playing the power game and rising up and making himself useful.
He's trying. Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, he's there at the company and he's putting like free or break room or whatever coffee in these dog poop bags to take home. And then Tom shows up and he's like, "Are we talking to each other on the poop deck of a majestic schooner, Greg? Then why the fuck are you wearing deck shoes?" Like, just bam, cutting him down to size. But you see him with a real swagger, even though you've mostly seen him up to that point is just you know, hanging his head down. I'll just be quiet, whatever you want, dear. So I love that the way those dynamics shifted.
Yeah, and he's playing both teams he's supposed to be the character that knows how both worlds work, whereas Greg is not from money really and doesn't understand this world. Tom is also not from money, and he's some Midwestern boy who has the opportunity of a lifetime, and he's kind of skyrocketing through the ranks, and he's one layer below the upper echelon of the company, making real money. He's really well off. He's about to marry the daughter of one of the most successful people in the world, but he also still has those Midwestern polite, like not going to be an asshole tendencies. But then he sees how being an asshole when you're super rich works. And there's even a whole episode where he's trying to teach Greg, like, I know where you came from. I've been where you are. Let me teach you how to really eat. Because Greg,
I'm going to teach you how to be rich, is what he says.
Yeah, I'm going to teach you how to be rich. Because I love the scene where Greg's like, I finally got paid, because he's like living in a hostel and he's like not eating enough, and he's like, you know, I'm going to go to the California Pizza Kitchen because they make this dish the way I really like it. And then Tom's like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't like it. Because Greg's like, no, but I really do. Like, no, you're coming with me. We're going out. I'm going to tell you what you like because I know better than you because I was once like you. And this was really like, you don't see this in a show very often. I really like these themes.
Yeah, I love when he says, it's like being a superhero. You have a superhero costume. It's just designed to buy our money.
Right.
So Tom and Greg, I really, really loved their interaction. Another aspect of Tom changing, depending on the context he's in, when Shiv has that prenup, he's like, I'm not even going to look at it. I'm sure it's fine. She's like, yeah, you really should look at it. Then he has his lawyer / mom look at it, and it's like, oh yeah, this is actually pretty unconscionable. You can be, you're going to have 3 instances of infidelity and I can't do anything. Was just the main thing I remember, but apparently they had to renegotiate it slightly because it was pretty intense.
Yeah, and he kept referring to like my lawyer, and then of course Shiv is like, you mean your mom? I'll have you know she's well respected in the Twin City area, or whatever it is. Like they have this banter going on where, like Tom wants to be at the big boys table and do things the rich people way, but then it shows through that he's just not there yet, and people are just pointing that out left and right. And even Tom also has other moments where he oversteps because he thinks he understands the hierarchy of who he can mess with and who he can't. Because obviously he's going to be on his best behavior as Midwestern polite boy for certain times and people. But then there's this scene where he wants to talk down to Shiv's brother's girlfriend, who was originally a call girl or whatever. And he's like, so what's your relationship now? And then there's this interplay where she's like, well, at least I'm only getting fucked by one member of the family, and like totally shuts him down. And he doesn't realize that, hey, Tom, part of being rich and knowing your place is not, overextending and being an asshole to everyone. Pick your battles. Like I just thought that was really interesting too. He's one of the best characters in the whole show.
Yeah, even though, I mean, like in a sense, he's almost sort of like a stand-in for the audience in terms of being an outsider to the family, but trying to get in. And so he's pretty interesting for that reason. But
Yeah.
also because we see him adjust his behavior and his level of assholery just based on what he thinks he can get away with and sometimes mess up. I also feel like that makes him one of the, in a weird way, the least has the least integrity of some of the characters.
He really does, yeah.
Because the others
Well,
just embrace being an asshole. At least they're being their true selves.
if I can go out on a limb and say, I think the showrunners maybe were trying to say, audience, you all think that you're watching this from the perspective of Greg. You all think you're Greg's, and like rich people are all assholes, and you're not like that. At least, assuming presumably the majority of the audience isn't super rich. But there's this hint of like, if given the opportunity, humanity is more like Tom's than they are like Greg's, but it's just a different perspective because Greg hasn't been corrupted yet. Tom is corrupted and has no real morals in a way. And then the super rich who are born into it in some ways are better than Tom because at least they know who they are and they have some sort of internal consistency. Anyway, so I thought that those were kind of the three main perspectives. You got the Gregs who've never had and probably never will be super rich. You got the Toms who didn't come from money but now have it, and then you've got the people who've always had money. And I think we all assume we're gonna be more like Greg, but the show's telling us that maybe Tom is more what a lot of us are like.
Yeah, maybe so. And even Greg ends up being able to pull one over on Tom by keeping records of that big
Yeah,
scandal.
that's true. That's a good point.
They'll be completely fucked over.
Right.
So maybe from Tom we can jump over to Siobhan.
Yeah.
She certainly has a very fascinating role because she doesn't work for the company per se, right?
Right. She doesn't. She's just an outside. She's a political consultant, and she's made a name for herself probably because of her family's name. So she wants to be independent and do the right thing by supporting liberals and women and politics and this sort of stuff. But she's also just cutthroat and hard-hearted when you come right down to it. Still, right?
Yeah, and I guess her main story arcs are that she ends up working for a political candidate who she keeps saying is likely to be the next president and who hates her dad.
Yeah.
She makes some comments. I get paid to insult my dad. This is great. Stuff like that. And then of course the other is that along with that she ends up having an affair.
Yeah.
Which is right before her wedding, and also I guess it gets sort of complicated in a, I don't know. It's real in a different way when she's having an affair and she says to Tom, the fiance, "Oh, you can have a hall pass. We're adults. Whatever happens, happens." And then that freaks him out a little bit. He keeps calling her back, like, "So when you said that, did you mean like what can we do and what's the consequences?" And then at the end, he finds out about her affair at the wedding, and they have this very awkward, half-hearted DTR, define the relationship, even though they're just barely married, about maybe being open, but
Yeah.
but they didn't really seem to come down 100% on what they were going to do. But it was certainly an open question.
Yeah, and this just shows that Tom has no internal consistency because rather than say, "Here's how I feel about it," you can see him thinking out loud. "Oh, you wanna? I guess I could." Okay, he's just such a pushover with anything coming top down. He's not his own person, and then people bottom up. Then he's the worst version of the people who are mistreating him, and that's what makes him such a fascinating character. That whole open relationship scene where they're talking about love is, not really definable. And it's this word that we use for a million different things. And what does it even really mean? In some ways you could think, oh, this is a cliche, but in other ways, this is one of the more smartly written versions of that conversation that I've seen on TV. So I really appreciate it. I thought it was well done and actually wasn't as crazy as it sounded. Notwithstanding the backstory of those two characters, there was a real conversation that happened where they actually made some progress in some ways.
I mean, kind of. They didn't really have it till after they were officially married, right?
Right, and one of
And
them had already cheated on the other. Okay, so it's not like this isn't the way to do it, people. But
there was a real power dynamic in that.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, and it was dressed up kind of more interesting than a lot of them.
Right.
We got Roman. We've only kind of talked about Roman, but you mentioned he's Weasley. I was going to call him a super brat with this super punchable face.
Yeah,
If you're going to punch anyone in that whole show, it's going to be Roman.
it really is, man. I could not stand him sometimes, especially because he's so transparently putting on a show, and he actually is really insecure, but never wants to let anybody in and be even his wife. We almost don't get enough of his backstory or his personal life, but we get enough to know that he's super fucked up and he has no real a grasp of intimacy or how to be real. It's all show and like hookers and coke or whatever cliche you want to come up with.
Except that he doesn't seem to be able to actually have sex with them.
Yeah, that's the other weird thing is he has some sexual hangups that aren't really explored that much, but it's enough for you to know that he likes to jerk off a lot, but he doesn't like to have sex with women, even though he likes to show he has power over them. And there's just a lot going on with him and his issues, which it's hard for me to say that I started to like him because probably of all of the characters, he's the one that I still wanted to punch in the face the most at the end, relative to like the arcs of everyone else. Me kind of getting to know and understand better.
But he starts to
Still,
try a little bit, and then
yeah,
you have a little like, okay, maybe he's going to turn his life around. Just a little like, yeah, go get him, underdog brother. Of
right.
course, then at the end, he oversees. I didn't quite get how much could be maybe pinned on him when the launch of the satellite ends up blowing up, but I guess he tried to push it faster than the safety protocols really allowed, and so maybe he was kind of to blame a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, this whole story arc I felt was a rare weakness in the show in so much as I felt like too much was going on. He's at his sister's wedding. This is like at the climax. It's the last two episodes. It's like in Scotland somewhere or some
I think Scotland, yeah.
exotic location at a castle. So it's unclear if Logan Roy, the patriarch, is going to actually come because they had the falling out and all this stuff. But then he comes in, and then Roman's there, and there's this launch of a space shuttle, I guess, or something. It seemed like
Well, they're going to put a satellite into orbit, but they had to do it with a big rocket, right?
with a big rocket. Yeah, satellite in orbit with a rocket. But then that blows up. But in this day and age, if you're in the bathroom watching your satellite rocket go off and it blows up and this is your family's company, the wedding's off. Like, I don't know that like nobody's going to be not talking about that and it's not going to destroy the experience of everything. But okay, maybe we can just grant the liberty here that for the show to work, the wedding had to be contextualized as not about that. Oh, and by the way, at the same time, the rocket blows up. Logan comes in. There's the politician that Shiv, who's getting married, is going to work for, who gets to meet her father that he hates for the first time. Just a lot of intersecting things that I was like, maybe this was one too many things happening in the same 30 minutes of time, but they did orchestrate it as best as you could. I just felt maybe one of those needed to go, but they all had their part, I guess.
I get. Yeah. I mean, it's heightened for dramatic effect. Of course, it is a TV show at the end of the day, so that didn't really bother me. But
Okay.
it's true, maybe a little unrealistic.
Yeah. Because they were all sort of in isolation of each other. I mean, the show is really well orchestrated in so much as it feels real, like you know where everybody is relative to where everybody else is in the background and which parts of the wedding in what order. Like, it was actually really believable. It wasn't that well, I'll just leave it there. I actually really enjoyed those last two episodes. I just felt like, wow, this is really a lot of stuff. And then, of course, what happened to Kendall in that final episode was even on top of everything else. It's like, whoa, so much happening. Crazy.
That's true. I just, yeah, think of it like Shakespearean almost.
Right.
Well, so we've been going at this for a long time. There's more that could be said, But is there more that must be said? Anything else you want to say about this before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to. I mean, we didn't get to talk too much about Connor Roy, played by Alan Ruck. I always think of him as the sidekick from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Sure, you never
um,
know.
he did such a good job of being this the older brother who sort of checked out and has all these crazy ideas about capitalism and wants to start his own podcast. And by the end, he wants to run for president. And that just every time he brings it up, everyone's like looking at each other. Did he just say what? Okay, that's the least of our worries. Sure, run for president. I thought his character also, for being like seventh billing or something, was really strong and interesting. And I'm just using that as a proxy for like 5 other characters we could talk about, but we just don't have time.
Yeah, just I'll say a little bit about Connor. I feel like, well, as you can tell, I feel like he was maybe less essential, which is why I didn't bring him up. But he also, I guess it's good to have a character or two like this. He sort of just symbolized the complete up your own assness of being rich and not having earned it even a little bit. Like when he has that exchange with Gil, the presidential candidate. He's like, "Oh, I just wiped the floor with him in a debate." Like, he's not going to be able to win if he can't even take on me. You know, the guy was just trying to get out of the conversation and being vaguely polite, not even that polite.
Right.
Things like that. And of course, what would you call it? Like a long-term prostitution relationship with that girl. Like, I'll fund your dreams coming true as long as you are exclusive romantically with me. And she hated it, but she did it completely as a transaction, not as love at all.
Yeah, it feels like working for a corporate company or something. Like, oh, I like the paycheck, but I wish I had more freedom and I could do what I really wanted to do in life. That whole relationship between Connor and Willa was fascinating. Yeah, I think you're right that Connor was more closer to the caricature side of what you would assume a rich person would be, detached and full of themselves and thinking that they've got things figured out when they really don't. But I'm glad that there was one character like that because the rest of them were.
I mean, they're that way too, but they were just more fully drawn in.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then we've got Jerry and Lawrence and Rava and like Francis. I'm just name dropping. It doesn't make sense for me to do that because we don't have time to even talk about each of these. But I just want to say I loved all the characters in this movie. And Stewie, the friend of Kendall, who's also just living the good life. And he'll say things like, "What's happening here? I might have to sell one of my houses if this goes wrong tonight," or just like lines like that. Just like these super rich people who get really stressed out because they might be slightly less rich over one thing that could go wrong. So the stakes are higher for them, but they also are totally fine.
Stewie also fucked over Ken in the board.
Yeah,
in the board vote because they're like, you know what, we're going to abstain just because everyone's looking for which way the wind's blowing power wise, and they don't want to be on the wrong side. So he could sense that and was just like, nope, I'm abstaining.
Yep. So love this show, love the subject matter it's covering because it's covering it so well. I'm just going to say I love it. It's a solid recommend. It's best TV for me so far in 2018. So there you go.
And if we neglected to say something super important, people tweet at us or something like that.
Yeah, let us know. Yeah.
Well, before we go, I definitely want to do a top 5-ish list. And here's my proposed category, Bob.
All right.
We're going to do the top 5-ish TV shows about filthy rich people.
Okay. That sounds fun. Yeah, why not? It seems like we have more to say about this than what was the one we did before? Top 5-ish black political dramas.
Something like that. Yeah.
Like that. Not that we're super rich. Anyway, let's just do it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think Succession is actually number 1 for me, but the next one I'm going to nominate is Billions. I'll throw Billions out there.
Okay. Billions is number 4 on my list, so we'll see where this nets out between the two of us.
Yeah, I like Billions. And I just want to clarify that we're doing like really, really filthy rich people, not upper middle class. So not like lawyers, but like filthy rich. And so Axe is in that category on Billions. I think it's pretty good, especially I think it's maybe even gotten better as it's gone. Okay, what's your nomination?
All right, you can tell me how you feel about this. My next one after Succession is Downton Abbey.
All right.
So, it's back early 20th century, filthy rich British pseudo royalty people have an estate and servants, and it's all about their life of having everything taken care of for them. Anyway, I think that it counts as filthy richness, and it's a really good show, and I really enjoyed it, so I'm putting it as number 2.
Yeah, I have had a hard time getting into Downton Abbey, but they're certainly filthy rich. And part of me wants to jump back in because as I've been getting more interested in fashion and men's clothes, I feel like that Edwardian era is a good influence
Ooh,
on today
yeah.
and stuff. So maybe that'll be my in. I don't know, but certainly it's respectable.
Cool.
I'm going to nominate Entourage.
Oh, I didn't even think of Entourage. That's a good one. Oh, where would that even go on my list? That's a solid pick. Yeah, that's a great show.
I don't know,
And it's
great, but it's a fun show.
well, it's a fun show. Okay, yeah, great is maybe reserve that word for other, but fun and definitely deserves to be somewhere in the middle of this list. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Do you have any more for us?
I do. I have a couple more. Next, I want to nominate. How to see how you feel about this? Arrested Development.
Are they filthy rich?
It seems like they were. Like they owned like a ton of houses, had a lot of money.
I guess they don't have jobs, so that's sort of like in my
Yeah, and
they
they're
don't
always
have to have jobs if they don't want to.
drinking in the middle of the day and had nothing to do. Especially the parents, the overarching family. You know, it's been a while.
Okay, fine. We'll do it. I'll put
You
it
can,
in
just,
there.
you can just push it down on the list if we need to.
Well, I don't want to deduct points for being. I
For
don't want gradations of how much
yeah.
they qualify. If they qualify, they get full credit.
I've
Okay,
got
what
one
else do you
more.
have?
Do you have one any more, or should I
No,
keep going?
I'm done.
All right, my last one, which I'd put at the bottom of the list, but it still deserves to be on the list, Logan. Revenge. Did you ever get into Revenge?
No, I didn't. Did you?
Oh, it's such a cliche ABC show about super filthy rich people. It's got kind of a Count of Monte Cristo vibe. I really, we in our house we really enjoyed it, and it's definitely in this category. And I have a soft spot for it, but it's not like super great TV, but it's fun. It's like in the Entourage categorization.
Okay, so here is my list, and it's a little weird when we disagree to come up with a joint list, but keeping
Do
in
it.
mind that we like some of these differently, I think this is okay.
All
I
right.
got Succession,
Mm-hmm.
Entourage, Billions, Arrested Development, Downton Abbey, Revenge. Is that a little too weird?
I'll take it. I'm just gonna run with it. That sounds fine.
Okay. All right. So anyway, there you go. That's our top 5-ish list about TV shows about filthy rich people. And that's our episode. Succession, spoiled. And if you listened without watching it first, we hope you can now fake it fairly well in whatever social situations you may need to. And that is this episode of the Practically Culture Spoilercast. Join us next week as we spoil. Wait, we didn't decide.
Well, maybe Crazy Rich Asians, or something else. We'll see.
I think it's probably going to be Crazy Rich Asians.
Ooh, I love it.
And we'll have the usual top 5-ish list and chat about what we're watching. You can find more from us at practicalculture.com and on YouTube and in your favorite podcast app. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Logan Bo. Bob's at Bob Caswell. Send us a message. Ask us a question. Let us know how you like the show. Come back and get your pop culture spoiled. Thanks for rocking with us.
Have a good one. All right.